In this video, we are going to show you how to replace your rear caliper. Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. The first thing you want to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, continue on to removing all 6 of your 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now we can take one of those lug nuts and we'll bottom it out against the rotor so it does not move around. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a nice clear view of our brake caliper. Looking at the back of the caliper, you're going to find the flex hose. That's going to make its way all the way up here. With that said, we'll continue on by restricting the flow of the brake fluid down to the caliper. I'll use some hose pliers, gently crimp that, making sure that I'm not damaging the hose in any way. The next thing you want to do is make sure you put a collection bucket under this area. We'll use a 17mm flare head wrench and try to break the flex hose free from the caliper itself. Now that I have that broken free, I'm just going to loosely snug it. I don't want it very tight because I do need to be able to break it free once the caliper is dismounted from the vehicle. We'll continue on to each of our 2 caliper slider pin bolts. To remove these, you're going to use a 10mm wrench. Once I get the first one out, I'll give it a quick inspection, and then I'm going to put it back in just a few threads to hold the caliper while I fully remove the second bolt. The next thing we want to do is grab onto the caliper and we're going to try to slide it up and away from the bottom first. Once you start pulling it away, you can pull it down and then we'll put it in the position where we can remove our brake pads. With the caliper up here, we're going to continue on with a small prying device. I want to try to get in between the ears right here and the brake pad, gently pulling it up so I can take the brake pad and slide it away from the caliper. When you do this, you're going to have to pull the pad down and away from the caliper. You can see it coming down right there. Just gently pry it and then pull it out. Do the same on the other side. Once you have your brake pads out of there, give them a quick inspection. You want to make sure that the meat area or the brake pad material is still in good condition. It's not cracked, damaged, or worn at a strange angle. Assuming it looks okay, go ahead and set it aside. We'll continue on to the inner pad. This one's a little easier. You can grab onto the pad and the outer ears. Carefully squeeze them together and it should slide out of the piston area. There should be 3 clips that hold it into the caliper piston. Now we can start unscrewing the flex hose from the caliper. This is going to be a little different than most calipers. In this case, you just hold onto the flex hose and spin the caliper, breaking it free. Keep in mind there is going to be brake fluid in this area. Make sure you're wearing hand and eye protection and you have a collection bucket under the area. There we are. The next thing you want to do is make sure that you empty out all the brake fluid from inside your caliper and then recycle it properly. Now let's move along to the bracket area that holds the caliper in place. On these brackets, you're going to find that they have a metal tin. We're going to remove that and replace it. So just go ahead and take it off. Once you have it off of there, you want to make sure that you sand down the area where the tin's supposed to go. If there's any rotted or raised areas, you want to make sure that they're smooth to the touch. After that, apply some high temperature caliper lubricant. Once you have both those areas cleaned, we're going to continue on to our mounting tins. Before you put those in place, continue on with some high temperature caliper lube. You want to make sure you put a thin amount inside of each of these tins. Once you have it on there, go ahead and slide it into position on the bracket. After you've done one, do the exact same thing to the other one. Now it's time to focus on the caliper itself. Let's start preparing it for installation. We're going to make our way over to each one of the slider pins. That's this area here. It's got a boot going over it. I'm going to try to take this and push it through towards the outside. I'll grab the boot and gently slide it off. Now I can carefully pull it out to this position. I'll continue on with a little bit of high temperature caliper lubricant. I'm going to come right inside this side of the boot and try to bring it all around this area. I'm trying to lubricate the boot, especially where the caliper is. Now once I have that fully lubricated, generally I like to put a little bit of lubricant on the pin itself. Most of this will get wiped off as we push it through the boot. Keep that in mind. At this point, we're clear to start pushing it back through. We'll bring it right on through to this point. And then once you hear it pop into the groove, you should be able to stop. I'm just going to wiggle this back and forth, and what you want to pay attention to is to make sure that the boot stays along each end. If it seems as though it slides down the cotter pin, it's probably not in the proper position. This one functions properly. I'll go ahead and wipe it down and then do the exact same thing to the other slider pin. Continue on with your high temperature caliper lubricant. We're going to go along each area of the caliper piston right here and along the back of the ears right along here. This is going to help with vibration dampening and noise reduction overall. Once you have it fully prepared, we can continue on with our brake pads. We'll start with the inboard pad. That's the one with the 3 prongs that go into the piston on the caliper. Once you have that pad in there, we can continue on to our outer brake pad. We'll have a look at the backside. This is the area that's going to go up against those 2 ears. You remember we had those 2 locking tabs that we gently pried. Now right along here, there's 2 little raised areas that you want to pay attention to. Those raised areas fit directly into these holes. So once we get this lined up and start sliding it down, we want those to fit in and be locked in position. I can see them through the holes. I'll just go ahead and give that a little tug to make sure it's secured in place. It's going to move around a little bit. That's okay, as long as it does not fully slide out. Now we can put the caliper on the flex hose. On the back side of the caliper, you're going to have the area for that flex hose to screw into. We'll just take this, get it lined up with the flex hose, and then turn the caliper to fully insert the flex hose into it. It can be a little hard to get it lined up. Once it gets going, you should be good to go. Obviously, you want to be extremely careful not to cross thread this in place, otherwise it will not seal. There we are. Now that I have this bottomed out, I'm going to take my wrench and try to snug this up. Something to keep in mind is you do not want to hang the caliper down like this, putting pressure on the flex hose if you have to go get your tool. Make sure that's snug. Now we can take this and put it up into position on the vehicle. When you do this, you want to pay attention to the flex hose. You can tell that it's going to have a little bit of a bend to it, and that's okay. But if I had twisted this around a couple times and tried to put it on here, you can tell that this is going to cause a brake restriction right along here. You're going to find you have braking issues. Pay close attention to that. Now also, as we put this up into position, along the top area of the brake pads, it's going to have a hook on the outer brake pad. This goes around the bracket right here. So we'll slide it in, put it on the bracket, and then we'll slide the bottom half in as well. Make sure those caliper slider pins are pushed out as far as we can. Slide the pads over the rotor. There we are. As you can tell, it's seated perfectly all the way across the bottom and along the top. If it seems as though even one of these ears is off kilter, you need to go ahead and take it right back off and make sure that it's inserted properly. At this point, you're ready to start in both of your caliper slider bolts. Make sure that you start these in by hand and do not tighten either of them until they're both started. Once you have both of them bottomed out, torque each of them to 24 foot-pounds. While this is mounted, let's make sure the flex hose is nice and tight. At this point, you're ready to move along to your caliper bleeder screw. You'll notice that it came with a brand new bleeder screw cover. We'll remove that and set it aside because you will be reusing it in the end. The next thing you want to do is take a 10mm wrench and loosen this up a little bit. After we loosen this, we'll remove our hose restriction pliers. Once you have that off of there, we'll continue on to using an 11mm wrench to loosen our bleeder screw. After you have that broken free a little bit from the caliper, after you have that loosened, let's remove these as well. The next thing you want to do is wait until the fluid gravity bleeds through the caliper here. It's going to take a couple minutes to make its way down through the flex hose and through the caliper. Once it starts coming out like this, you can go ahead and close it off and you'll continue on with a manual bleed. Now to do a brake bleed on this, it's going to be best having two people. You want to have one person inside the vehicle getting ready to pump up the brake nice and slow. The second person is going to be out here and they're going to open and close the bleeder screw. Before we go ahead and do this, you want to make sure that you top off your master cylinder with .3 brake fluid and close it. Now at this point, we can continue on with our bleed. Let's have the person inside the vehicle pump the brake pedal 3 times and hold it on the last, and then let me know. Go ahead and pump, please.
Holding.
Now when I open this, I'm paying attention for the fluid coming out of here. Obviously I don't want to have my face in front of it, but what I do want to do is make sure I don't see any air. If you see any air bubbles, that means you need to repeat the process until you don't. Go ahead and pump.
Holding.
At this point, I'm still seeing some air coming out of the bleeder screw, so I'll continue. Go ahead and pump.
Holding.
Now on that last time, I didn't see any air coming out of the system. It's always a good idea to at least give it one more time. If you go 2 times and you don't see any air, you should be good to go. Go ahead and pump.
Okay. Holding.
All right, assuming that time looked good, go ahead and clean up your mess and then put on your bleeder screw cover. At this point, we've fully installed our rear caliper. You want to make sure that you torqued both of your slider bolts and everything's nice and tight. After that, go ahead and remove your lug nut and install the wheel. Once you get the wheel in place, go ahead and start on all 6 of your 21mm lug nuts. We'll bottom them out, get the wheel back on the ground, and then torque them to 98 foot-pounds. With the wheel safely on the ground, we'll torque these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Now the next thing you want to do is make your way back under the hood. We're going to double check that master cylinder. Make sure it's topped off up to the maximum line with .3 brake fluid. If it looks like it's low, just go ahead and turn this cap counterclockwise, give the seal a quick inspection, set that aside. Top it off with the .3, and then of course make sure you put the cap back in place to keep out moisture and debris. All right, at this point, you're clear to go ahead and close the hood. Hop in the truck, take it for a little road test. Make sure the brakes feel fine. Aside from that, thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.